She's a rebel with a cause. We speak to the thorn in the Prime Minister's side, the suspended MP, Rachael Maskell.
And we ask, if you were to meet a 16-year-old, who would you tell them to vote for, Rachael? Keir Starmer or Jeremy Corbyn?
I just think we need some healing across our country and across our politics. And I think it does no one any good to talk about being hard. Hard for what purpose? What's achieved from that? And I just don't think there's any evidence behind that.
Rachael Maskell, thank you very much for joining us. Could you explain to us, first of all, why did you rebel?
Well, not only did I read all the evidence as the impacts that these changes would bring, but I reached out to my constituents and heard their lived experience. And what became evident to me as soon as I read the Pathways to Work paper was that, first of all, disabled people weren't involved in the big decisions, the fiscal decisions, the things that would remove money from their pockets and push them into poverty. And indeed, the analysis, 400,000 people to be placed in poverty, but also taking away their agency. But also, we're not in the Labour Party for people to experience greater hardship. And I wanted to ensure that people had a voice, but also people had the means in which to live. And therefore, it's really important that we return to those Labour values of equality and justice and fairness, and ensured that disabled people, and I heard some pretty harrowing stories from my constituents, to ensure that they had franchise in this debate. And that's why I worked so closely with deaf and disabled people organisations and charities. 138 of them signed my reasoned amendment, although that's not formally recorded in Parliament. That's what happened because they universally did not support the changes the government were bringing in.
I should put it to you that the government, of course, would say, we already have listened, we already have compromised, and we've agreed to delay the changes to PIPs until the Timms review comes in. Why were you not satisfied with what the government was prepared to give to backbenchers?
This couldn't just be about people receiving PIP today. It had to be about people receiving PIP in the future. And of course, that change happened just ahead of the day before the report stage and third reading. But also, there are significant changes, £2 billion worth of cuts to universal credit, the health element. And that would have had devastating impact on disabled people, and the evidence in the impact assessment demonstrated 150,000 people being pushed into poverty and many more people being worse off. So again, the same arguments and the wrong approach being taken towards those cuts. And quite frankly, we need to protect and support people. And I said to government, if there's proof in case that the rest of the package got more people into work, really helped people that could work, then that is a fantastic thing, and we've got to champion that. However, if it left people desperate and without, then clearly the policy would have failed, but it really would have failed catastrophically, particularly for those people with very fragile mental health. And I couldn't cross that line.
Rachael, cards on table. I disagree with you on the welfare bill and think it should be reduced dramatically. However, I respect that you've taken a principled and sort of dignified stance on this. Your treatment, along with the colleagues that have also been suspended, that's Neil Duncan, Jordan, Brian Leishman and Chris Hinchliffe, hasn't been great, has it? I'm staggered to read this, and I do apologise in advance for the language, but one party source said the MPs had been suspended for, quotes, persistent knobheadery. I mean, what's your reaction to that? That's not the way to treat backbenchers who might not agree with government policy.
No, I mean, I hope that that's drawn out where that's come from, because quite frankly, I find it very insulting and unprofessional. And I think we've approached this, all of the MPs who really wrestled with this with a degree of professionalism, wanting the very best, acting in the interests of others. That speaks of factionalism and quite frankly should not be tolerated within the Labour Party, whereas I do think that taking a more evidence-based approach, supporting people with lived experience, is the right way forward. It reflects the culture of our party. And just to disagree slightly with yourself, I want to see the social security bill come right down, because I do believe that work is good for your physical and mental health, but we've got to protect those people that can't work and take people on that journey where their health is so fragile, which stops them from working. And the best way of doing that is, of course, looking at employers. We don't have the Charlie Mayfield report yet, but employers got a huge responsibility because they discriminate, and that we see that revolving door so much for disabled people and people that are unwell. They've got to have duties placed on them to keep people in work and to guarantee secure employment for disabled people as well.
Just to use more bad language, again, apologies. Is this all part and parcel of the Prime Minister's boast to Nick Robinson that he's a, quotes, hard bastard? I mean, is he trying to flex some muscles here? It's like another version of take back control.
Well, let's face it, I think our political system is quite broken because it doesn't have kindness and compassion at its centre. And they're the values which I hope to bring to the table, because I do believe when we are a kinder and compassionate country, that more people will thrive, that will help us economically, it will help society be more cohesive. I just think we need some healing across our country and across our politics. And I think it does no one any good to talk about being hard. Hard for what purpose? You know, what's achieved from that? And I just don't think there's any evidence behind that.
Having said that, we've had some rather unkind and uncompassionate words from your colleague Diane Abbott today. She's been saying once again, and this is a sort of doubling down on a claim she made some time ago, that Jews experience racism differently to black people. She's now claiming it's silly to liken racism based on skin colour to racism faced by Jewish and traveller communities. This understandably has caused a huge amount of offence to Jewish and traveller communities. And there are now calls for her to be suspended from the party. It's not gentler, kinder politics, this, is it?
Look, there's no hierarchy in discrimination. We know that so many people experience discrimination for whatever reason, whether it's because of the religion and belief or their ethnicity or because they're a disabled person. And of course, Diane Abbott has got her own experience of discrimination. I think we need a broader debate around discrimination because I think it's poorly understood. We know that it's on a very sharp rise in our communities, and that troubles me greatly. In my own constituency, I see that too. And I think we've got to understand what is happening and get ahead of that curve and ensure that we really clamp down on all forms of discrimination.
But
and
if you're white,
it is right to say that there are different kinds of discrimination experienced by people of different protected characteristics.
Well, even if you don't have any. But Rachel, even if
I don't know the full
but if you don't
context,
have,
but
if you don't
all discrimination is wrong.
Even if you're not Jewish, if you're white and somebody refers to you in racist language, like calling you white trash or a white bitch or bastard or whatever, that's racism, isn't it? White people can be subjected to racism in the same way that black people can, correct?
Or yes, anything which is discriminatory, which is about identifying somebody's characteristics and using that in a derogatory way, or even worse, then of course that has got to be stamped out. And that's why I am talking about having a different culture in our country, because I think what's really important is that we elevate the way that we engage with one another into a place of greater respect and dignity. And we need to talk about those values so much at the heart of our politics. And linking back to the reason you've got me on your podcast there is to say that if there is respect and dignity for disabled people, it means about giving people agency and opportunity and voice and presence. And that was so missing from this policy decision.
Given that Labour is pursuing these sorts of policies, and it's not the only one, as we mentioned earlier, it's also raising defence at the same time as it's doing this sort of stuff. Is there any part of you which is tempted, especially now that you've been suspended, to cross the floor and join Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, look, I'm Labour through and through, whichever way you cut me. I've been a member of the party for 34 years. I remain a Labour Party member. I think the Labour Party is founded in incredible tradition and values. I think about where it came from Christian socialism, from the trade unions, which again have real deep roots around speaking around social justice, speaking up for the disenfranchised in our society, giving agency to those people, quite frankly, who are being exploited. So of course I'm Labour, and I hold on to those values. I want this government to be the very best of governments, the best government we've ever had. But I think things are going to have to change to achieve that. And quite clearly, the polls are saying that as well. And I will support our party in that transition to be better than it is at the moment.
Everything you've just said, Jeremy Corbyn would agree with. And he would also describe himself, I'm sure, as Labour through and through. And he's been a member of the party even longer than you have. But ultimately, he was pushed out. What happens when the leadership of the party just is determined to walk away from those values? Surely people who are loyal to those values will be forced and compelled to seek an alternative party.
Well, what I say to the Prime Minister, now we're entering the summer season, and I hope he has a decent break, but also a time of reflection. I think it's really important to do that in politics for all of us. But in that time of reflection, to think about how we can really build trust in our party, build engagement, collaboration, cooperation, those values which are so important, but also inclusivity, which is, again, important. So politics has to change. Our country is crying out for it. People are looking in some very dark places and difficult places to find the hope in their lives. And I think particularly people are going online, people have got really severe mental health challenges, people are being exploited because they're looking for hope in the wrong places, and people are voting in places which are quite unimaginable to them a few years ago, and certainly will not serve them well in the future. So I really do hope that people can see a government which wants to engage with them and wants to include them in a much more engaged and inclusive society. I think will benefit us all.
Rachel, if you don't mind me saying, you're a poster girl for the left. So let me ask you this one final question, and maybe you can try and give me a one-word answer. You have to advise a 16-year-old how to vote. Do you tell them to vote for Keir Starmer or Jeremy Corbyn?
I would say Labour. Absolutely.
That's
Labour
not
through and through.
That's
And
not
what
the same
I
as Keir
That's
Starmer,
not
though,
the
is
same
it?
as Keir
well,
Starmer.
look, we don't vote for prime ministers, we vote for parties in our country.
Brilliant.
And the reason I say that, I've seen so many prime ministers in my time that probably by the time that person reached 20, there'll be 3 or 4 prime ministers. But
All right.
what
That's
I
a
would
very
say
good
is
answer, actually.
politics will never be perfect, but get engaged and change it yourself.
Rachael Maskell, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on the Daily Tea.